So today, Rob Biernacki on how never to tap to any armbar ever again.
Okay. So let me bring the hyperbole down a little bit.
One easy trick to never tap to an armbar ever again.
One magical solution that has nothing to do with science. Now, apropos of science, I did actually want to bring up an idea that I believe should be familiar to everyone that does Jiu-Jitsu, which is, I think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is science. I think that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the scientific method applied to, at the very least, grappling, if not combat, because you can say that MMA is that method applied to combat, but certainly it's the scientific method applied to martial arts grappling, in that we use what is the primary method in science, which is testability, falsifiability, and replicability. A lot of people tend to think that science is an organization or a viewpoint or something like that. It's not.
Conspiracy.
A conspiracy, certainly, yeah. There's some really intelligent folks that think that. And here come the comments from certain people. Anyway, the idea is that science is a method. It's a way of discerning valid information from invalid information. And one of the things that I try to do constantly throughout my jiu-jitsu is apply the notion of a hypothesis and then testability. And so I've been doing that with a particular armbar defense that I certainly didn't come up with. I've watched a few people do this, and I was not ever able to use it until I started applying some of the formula stuff that we've talked about before, the idea of for base posture structure, frames and levers, understanding basic biomechanics. And so the armbar escape that I'm talking about is, well, it's a combination of two things. One is the hitchhiker escape, which is a very commonly done armbar escape. So for instance, if you have an armbar and my arm starts to get extended and I know that I'm going to have to tap, I'm going to turn, walk my body around, rotate up, and come out of the armbar. But even more specifically, there's a famous incident at ADCC a few years ago where Vinny Magalhaes was in a match with Fabricio Werdum. There we go. And he was actually in a fully extended armbar for a time and was making some adjustments with his body. And so you can start applying some pressure here. And it was very difficult, in fact impossible, for Werdum to get the tap. And now one of the things that we try to talk about at my academy is the idea of only practicing things that are valid at the highest level. One of the things that I would argue the majority of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructors are doing at certain academies certainly is they're applying stuff that only works on white belts or blue belts, and when you get to a higher level, a lot of what you learn doesn't really work, and that's something that I think in science we would refer to as an insignificant statistical, or a statistically insignificant sample size.
So we're going to go through those two armbar escapes, but before we do, what would be an example of a technique that works at white belt that doesn't work at purple belt?
The initial way that people are taught a triangle choke, which is grab the hand, stuff it down, throw up the triangle. That doesn't work against anyone who understands posture.
But
even the
don't you think that
armbar
has some value to training the position of the legs? And you're doing a whole lot of plate spinning with something like a triangle choke. But it teaches people that simplified version.
Well,
it's like saying that kids should start writing out Chaucer and Shakespeare before they do.
No, I actually don't agree, because I don't think that teaching people submissions in their first week as a white belt is a good idea. I think that what you're doing is you're creating, again, if we want to talk about testability, you're talking about people who, if we replicate over the course of large numbers, if you have a bunch of people who have no understanding of how to control their own body, and even less understanding of how to control someone else's body, attempting to apply submissions that, in the case of a triangle choke, it's benign because you're not going to injure somebody with a choke, you're just going to choke them out. But in terms of arm bars, again, I don't think that beginners should be learning arm bars in their first week or two, certainly not arm bar from the guard, where the answer that every beginner has to any technique not working is to go way harder on it. And so I would rather that people learn the basic mechanics of how to control their own alignment, and then how to control somebody else's alignment, and then how to take that to the point of breaking. So I have a complete value-based disagreement on that, which is, I think it's more dangerous. I think statistically speaking, if you put a bunch of unskilled people and you don't give them a bridge to the skill set that covers the area where you're controlling somebody without applying an overwhelming amount of force to a joint, I don't think that that's a good way to go.
Well, let's get on to the armbar escape.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about how you've been testing it and this idea of testability and falsifiability.
Yeah, absolutely. So the escape, again, if we look at the hitchhiker escape, the way that I've always failed to do it in the past was the arms start to get extended, I would start to rotate and my shoulder would stop and I would feel like I didn't have enough shoulder flexibility. So I always chalk this up to, this is a flexible guy escape, or it's an escape for somebody who doesn't have a lot of concern for their elbow joint. And by watching that particular match between Fabricio Werdum and Vinny Magalhaes, I noticed that the rotation of Vinny's body allowed his shoulder to elevate above the elbow, so that now, as I go to turn, I'm actually bridging and rotating my shoulder in a manner that's pretty available to anybody who isn't, severely diminished in their shoulder flexibility or mobility. I don't have particularly flexible shoulders. If I attempt the hitchhiker escape while I stay in a flat plane with my shoulders relatively even, I have to tap. But as I'm able to elevate my shoulders and change the angle, even now if you start lifting and bridging, I can pretty much absorb the pressure of the armbar without even completing the escape. Right? So that's the initial sort of insight, is as I am turning and bridging and rotating, I'm able to change the angle of my body to come up out of the escape, keeping my head tight and moving past the guard.
So you're rolling up on your side like this
Yes.
to elevate the shoulder.
Yes, exactly.
That
And
reduces my ability to break your arm, obviously.
So I started trying to test this in application against visiting students. We have a visiting student program in my academy. If you haven't heard about it, anyone from any academy anywhere in the world is welcome to come stay with me and train for free for 1 week. We have visitors from all over the world coming on a regular basis. I think we've had about 30 or 40 people visit so far this year. And so because those people are not specifically familiar with some of these concepts that I'm talking about, and the way that I teach the armbar at my academy specifically avoids some of these things coming into play. So I've been using them as pretty much guinea pigs, which I have no better way to say it. And I'm just letting people have at it when it comes to arm bars.
So you're giving them the armbar.
I'm giving them the armbar, and I'm not doing the hitchhiker. So what I've been doing, and again, you have to be very careful about this, and I'm certainly not suggesting that you sit in a fully applied armbar and not tap if you feel any pressure. Right? So if you start to gently apply an armbar here, there you go, I'm tapping. So I'm not at all averse to tapping. But the more I've been able to rotate and get on my side, so now start applying, I can pretty much absorb the armbar because of the height of my shoulder relative to my elbow, lifts my elbow off the ground enough that you can't create enough of a fulcrum. Now obviously this is going to run out depending on height. My arms are fairly long, and I can generally, most of the people that I'm rolling with are shorter than I am. So I can certainly absorb a little bit more because of that. If I had a
giant belly and if I was much, much taller than you.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm not saying that this is just the solution to the problem, but to this day, not one person has been able to make me tap in this position that's been visiting. So someone's going to come in here and break my arm, I guarantee, because again, I'm not suggesting that this just always works. But it helps give insight into the proper mechanics of isolating a joint to break it, and helps give insight into the proper mechanics of how to angle your body to deny the amount of pressure that's necessary to actually break someone's arm. And so so far the testing process, and again, it's not like I'm the one that has to come along and prove this. Vinny Magalhaes already proved that this works at the highest level. It's just that what I was trying to do is experiment with what are the biomechanics that make this viable so that I can be better at teaching it. So it's a slightly different experiment. I'm not experimenting with the validity of it. I'm experimenting with how to understand it so that I can convey the information.
And you know what? Do it to me, because I've played with this and I've not managed to make this work.
Right.
So I must be doing something wrong.
Okay.
So we're here. I turn as far away as I can, and that's beginning to hurt my elbow.
Okay. So if you're able to, first of all, impart a little bit of rotation to your arm, and bring your feet in closer so that you can make a slight bridging. There we go, good. So now...
Okay, so if I turn my thumb
if you're
down
able
to
to
the
turn
ground...
Your thumb, now even if I turn your thumb up, keep making the rotation.
Yeah,
there you go.
It buys me some time,
Yeah.
but
So
what's the difference there? Is it flexibility in the elbow joint, perhaps?
The difference is, again, to a certain degree, it's the length of the limbs. I'm a fairly tall guy, so my bridge is higher than yours. But, I mean, if you look at, I was almost at the apex of my bridge. I didn't have a whole lot of room left. You tapped because your elbow kind of hurt.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you had, like your elbow was about to break?
No. And if this was, Abu Dhabi finals,
well, and so
money on the line,
right,
I could probably have eaten that. I could have eaten that for a while.
Well, so this is where the other sort of aspect of the equation, the science part comes in, is your statistical inference is based on, for the most people doing jiu-jitsu, is based on other people in your club that are probably white belts or blue belts, because that is the vast majority of the jiu-jitsu population. So you have an idea that you can break someone's arm because you make a fellow white belt or blue belt tap in training, whereas the reality is, chances are, you don't actually know how to break someone's arm, even if you've been doing jiu-jitsu for 5 years. That's a legitimate possibility. And
define break the arm.
Break the arm meaning cause let's say,
a lasting injury.
A lasting injury. Yeah, we're not talking about like a couple of pops where you've got like a sprained ligament. We're talking about either an actual fracture, or we're talking about like
Frank Mir, Tim Sylvia.
Frank Mir, Tim Sylvia, exactly.
Albeit with a metal cup.
Exactly, but yeah, like either
Let's try this again and I'll get the biggest metal cup that I can that gives me like a metal cod piece.
Exactly.
When
I say breaking the arm, I mean something that causes an injury that will prevent you from training for, let's say anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. So, a ruptured or detached biceps, which is another potential injury from an arm. A completely ruptured or torn ligament that would require surgery, or anything that would require immobilization of the arm. I'm not talking about, like, again, a sprained ligament or a sprained capsule. The amount of force necessary to create a break is greater than people realize. The amount of isolation required to create a break is greater than people realize. And because most of us that train are hobbyists who have jobs, then the statistical inference that you're using is invalid. You have to use what works at the black belt level amongst other black belts who are fighting black belts. And with that in mind, again, you see how often do people escape the armbar, how often, what do they use, what's actually valid, and I think most people could massively stand to work on their armbar technique just based on that.
Well, let's not leave it exactly here. You've shown an armbar defense,
yes.
You can survive within the armbar. Yeah. You're also turning your thumb down, which is the opposite direction of how it needs to go for the hitchhiker.
Yes.
So let's just say that I've caught you in an armbar, and let's just say you're using that to survive, and I can't tap you, but you're not out. And you want to get out.
Yeah.
How would you convert this defense into an escape?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the first thing is, I do recommend the hitchhiker as the initial motion, right? Like, the only reason that I turn my thumb this way as I rotate is if I'm trying to stay here to prove a point.
Right.
Like, I'm not trying to, whereas the initial motion would always be, as you start to extend my arm, I'd be turning and rotating my thumb down.
Sure.
Right? Having said that, if I do find myself here, and for instance, the way that I generally teach people to do the armbar is I don't teach the thumbs up. I actually teach to slightly rotate the thumb this way to negate the hitchhiker escape. Exactly. So in this case, I'm having to do this just to survive the arm lock because I can't rotate to the hitchhiker. And you'll notice as I turned, I brought my arm, so if my arm started here, as I turned, I brought my arm underneath. And now I'm accessing the end of this lever. So it's your right leg. It's the one that's in my armpit. And I'm making a Y grip underneath it. And so you can start extending. And then I'm going to rotate back the other way. And I'm maintaining the pressure. I can't let go of this because right now you feel how my shoulder is free. That's what's making me safe. If you can clamp this down, now I'm back in the armbar. Even though you don't have my head covered, my shoulder is pinned. And that's actually the main missing ingredient in a lot of people's armbars, is that the shoulder is actually free. So I'm maintaining that shoulder rotation as I withdraw my elbow and then I come up and try to get into base.
Which takes us to another escape proven at the highest level, because if I recall correctly, that was Buchecha versus Roger Gracie at Metamoris 1.
Exactly.
Very similar.
Very similar. Yes, exactly. And again, the illusion that's created there, if you don't apply a lot of analysis to it, is that it's the head getting free that makes that escape work. And that's absolutely not the case. It's the shoulder getting free. So again, as we went over, if I pop my head out, but you're able to clamp my shoulder down, then I don't have the ability to change the angle, and the fulcrum stays low enough where you can generate massive force into it.
Right.
So I do have to, as I'm doing this, I'm not trying to pop my head up, I'm trying to pop my shoulder out. And
you're not coming up as much as you're rotating.
Exactly. What I'm doing is setting my feet in base so that I can generate a little bit of a push as I go. Or a scoot down, actually. I'm not pushing, I'm scooting myself down and pulling my elbow out, or sorry, my shoulder out. And that actually frees my elbow.
Right.
If I stay here and I try to pull my elbow out, it can't be done, the angle is wrong. So I've got to remove my shoulder, and then that's what's actually keeping me safe.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, so final caveat, don't do this unless you've trained it with somebody sane first.
Absolutely, and again, I have the benefit of trying this against people that are, positively disposed towards me. They don't think that I'm the worst person in the world because I've made certain comments in the past about whatever. So yeah, a training partner that you trust. And let me just state this: I'm the biggest proponent of tapping early and often. I will not sit and eat a submission of any kind. Literally, the only reason I'm able to do this is because I understand the science behind it. I know when I'm safe. I know when the angle is wrong. I can generally look at someone and just know by their height whether they'll be able to bridge enough. Like, I would not try this if someone was 6'8", because no amount of rotation that I create will give me enough freedom to prevent there from being an injury to my elbow. So I'm not trying to be in any way macho or foolhardy. Yeah, if you feel any pressure in your elbow ever at any point, you should be tapping and training.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.